What's going on, everyone? Sean from All Things EV, and this is my first video since May. I'm so sorry. A lot of you have been asking, where's Sean? What's he up to? Is everything okay? I've been getting text messages and DMs, but I've been busy with life, but I'm excited to get back to a few videos, maybe once a month, once every quarter, something like that. And we're kicking things off with Jordan from the Limiting Factor YouTube channel. Jordan's been on before. I'll link the last conversation we had in the video description, but welcome back. Good to see your face.
Yeah, good to see yours too, and I'm happy to see you back in the saddle. I always enjoy your content, and happy to join you for some conversation.
I appreciate that, and it feels good. I was asked to be on a conference call after the last Tesla earnings call, and it just felt good to vibe and jam with some other people who have been following the industry and following Tesla's battery supply chain, all the challenges. And I'm excited to get into some of that. And I kind of feel like I wish I had a little bit more time to prep and come up with some questions. But in some ways, whenever I'm in those situations, it's almost good because then I come in with just a completely open mind. I don't know a lot about a lot of the stuff that you've been talking about on your channel, about battery, supply chain, and what I think we'll probably discuss in detail about is 4680s. I think that's kind of a hot topic right now. So maybe we can start off there. Like, it's been almost, what, a year since they did their battery day. Where's Tesla at right now? What have they been working on in the last 12 to 14 months? And when can we expect these things to go into vehicles and for people to start driving those vehicles?
Yeah, so Battery Day was 22nd of September last year. And they said that they would have to do a few iterations before that they're prepared to go into production. And I think it was just before Battery Day I said it would probably be about a year before they would actually get those lines broken in and get into a nice rhythm. And based on like the Q2 earnings call, they said, hey, we're very close. I think that was July. They said, we're very close to production. We just have a few kinks to work out. Literally, it sounds like they're, when they were trying to roll the material for the cathode side of battery production, they were getting compression issues or wrinkles or dimples that were causing issues for the cathode side of the roller. And then in the last earnings call, there was no talk about any issues, and they were focusing on the battery pack. So to me, it sounds like things are resolved on the battery side of production for the 4680 battery pack, and now they just need to test the pack and make sure that that works, which has caused issues in the past for them, both in production and testing. It's caused delays before. And then there's other YouTubers that have been doing updates based on the sources that they have at Cato Road, and all of them are saying that the yield rate is good, everything is looking good. So from my perspective, everything looks positive, and I'm hoping we'll see these 4680 battery cells in vehicles in the first quarter of 2022. I'll stop there because I could keep going for a while.
Yeah, I'm sure. So, okay, so they've got Cato Road, which is sort of like their pilot production line. Is this? I think I saw some headlines that said that some of their battery suppliers, like Panasonic, are starting to produce things. Like, how's that going to break down? Is Tesla going to be exclusively producing those 4680s on their own in Texas, or is it going to be in at Giga One in Nevada? Is this going to be in Japan? Like, how's that all shake out, or is it going to be everywhere?
I think it's going to be the new standard. It was Rob Maurer did an interview with Pierre Ferragu a few days ago or last week, and he was saying that this is going to be a new standard, which aligns with my thinking that everybody's going to be producing these 4680 cells. Now, what gets people confused is there's the 4680 form factor, which it's easy to change the form factor of a battery cell, but it's all the other technologies that go inside that 4680 form factor that there will be differences between these batteries. Panasonic, for instance, I'm betting that Tesla has shared how to do the tabless technology and maybe a few other bits and pieces as to how the battery cell comes together so it can actually fit in a Tesla battery pack.
Yeah, so unpack that a little bit for the uninitiated. I'm fully on board with the idea that the form factor is the form factor is the form factor. There's a lot more things that make it unique, and far greater things that are outside of the form factor that make it really special, what Tesla's doing. So you talked about tabless batteries, but what other things make what Tesla's doing unique with this?
I want to get a 4680 cell so I can get it torn down, because at Battery Day they said there's a lot of technology in that battery cell that they weren't talking about. So I'm assuming it has to do with mitigating the risks of fire propagation and making sure that if one cell fails, it doesn't take out the whole pack. So I'm interested to see what new technologies they have in that department, because as we saw with the Bolt or the Volt recall, I always get them confused. Having these battery cells in a vehicle, high nickel battery cells, they do pose a risk. And I'm sure one of the things that Tesla wanted to do with the 4680 is make sure that it was extraordinarily safe, despite having a lot of energy packed into a small area. Now, one thing that's I don't think any other manufacturer is going to be doing in the near term or the midterm, between the next 2 to 5 years, I think Tesla is going to be the only one that has a dry battery electrode battery cell. And that offers a few different benefits, from potentially higher power output and potentially higher charging speeds, and potentially higher energy density than the others, but definitely a higher production rate and lower costs.
I've heard people talk about the structural pack. So is that another one of the things that makes this move towards this new form factor and all the other goodies that are kind of wrapped in each cell unique?
There's the 4680 battery cell, and then there's the structural battery pack. To a certain extent, they will be designed for each other. But I think the reason a lot of these manufacturers are switching to a 4680 battery cell is they see Tesla will be the dominant vehicle manufacturer, so we better make these cells for Tesla. And I think they're going to need to work with Tesla to a certain extent and design their battery cells so they can work in the 4680 battery pack, because there might be some differences there with prior battery technology.
I've seen some skeptics and critics say that what Tesla's doing with these 4680s is nothing remarkable or special. Is it because they're looking at some of these other battery makers or suppliers and saying, oh, they're making them too, there's nothing special about what Tesla has done?
Well, I think they do what I've seen a lot of people in the corporate space do, or bureaucracies do. They say something that's true in a very narrow sense. So if you look at one or two aspects of the 4680 battery cell, like just changing the form factor, yeah, anybody can make a bigger form factor. But what about making a larger battery cell that contains more energy, that's also safer, that's produced at multiple times more quickly than other battery cells, and uses a better cooling architecture and electrical architecture? Doing all those things at once, that's a different story.
I haven't been following Alex's research and content. Number one, can you summarize what he's put out so far, and is he publishing it somewhere on a website or YouTube or something like that?
Yeah, so what they're doing, it's the official XPod YouTube channel. Primarily what they do is they're on the Call-In app, and they have discussions about things, and then they, for people who want to follow along visually, they've started using some sort of digital whiteboard application. So while they're talking, people can see him lay things out and show how everything fits together. And what he's doing, he's an engineer, and he's looking at everything that has been released by Tesla and the little leaks and bits of information that he's getting out of Kato Road, and he's walking people through exactly how he thinks the battery cell is put together. And now that he's done that, he's moving on to how he thinks the battery pack will be assembled.
Yeah, absolutely. How much insight, if any, did we receive when Tesla did their tours of Giga Berlin? They did demonstrate or have at least some models of some of the packs and the displaying some of the cells inside. Did anyone glean anything from those photos and videos that you know of?
Well, the thing is, and this is something that Sandy Monroe said as well, and other people that I've talked to that were there that know something about engineering, it looks like the packs that we saw were display models. And some of them, or at least the 2170 model, could have been from several years ago. So what we were saying wasn't necessarily new. And it may have been a red herring. For instance, the 4680 battery pack, the way that Alex has explained it is the way that the cells and cooling ribbons are arranged, it's not the most efficient use of space, so it's probably running in a different direction. And on top of that, there was no wiring included. There was a lot of things missing that you would need for a battery pack. So it was good to get eyes on it, but I don't think it tells us a lot about what the final production version will look like. So I'm excited for a teardown. Looking forward to that.
Understood. Okay. So let's sort of like scale this back a little bit. We sort of touched on a little bit of the details of why this move to 4680, the structural battery pack, and all the things that are within it are a good idea. But let's scale this back to like a higher level, 30,000 foot view. Someone who's watching this conversation today as an investor of Tesla, what is the larger business impact or business lift of Tesla moving this direction away from what they had with the cells and the modules and the smaller cells to something like what they talked about a year ago at Battery Day?
Overall, what the 4680 battery cell and structural battery pack allows is you to, when you increase production rate and get rid of unnecessary materials, you drive the cost of production down to the cost of materials that you put into the battery pack. It also makes your manufacturing more efficient when you can get rid of those things. So Tesla's both going to accelerate the speed of their manufacturing lines and drive the cost of their batteries and packs down to the materials cost. And this is one of the most interesting parts of Battery Day for me was I think their feeling is that with the 4680 battery line, they're going to reduce the costs so quickly that they're going to need to start attacking the materials cost. So I think that's why Tesla's moving upstream of battery packs and battery cells. They're going, all right, we need to start bringing this raw materials manufacturing in-house because that's, you can reduce those raw material costs by about 30% if you bring them in-house.
This is not only, reducing the materials costs is a large part of this. But I think in addition to that, and some of the things that we're kind of seeing with other automakers is supply shortages, supply chain challenges, disruptions, COVID. All these things have sort of turned things upside down. But Tesla seems like, based on their delivery numbers, have fared pretty well with delivering vehicles, which if you sort of keep going back further and further, the battery pack, the cells, the raw materials, it all comes down to those raw materials. So I think in addition to driving down the cost, it's also controlling a little bit more of your destiny and recession or global disruption proofing the business for long term. Would you agree?
I totally agree. Yeah, and I'm glad you brought this up because this is a passion point of mine, is controlling those raw materials and raw materials costs. And just, Elon isn't a person who likes to have somebody else control of his destiny because usually, and this feeling is justified, he can do it better and cheaper and in a more environmentally friendly way. So I think you're dead on there. And raw materials in general, we're already seeing the supplies of a number of raw materials for batteries tighten up. And that's independent of what we're seeing with the supply chain and the COVID issues. This is, there's fundamentally not enough production of battery materials and raw materials to supply the ramp that we need. in the next 3 to 5 years. I'm actually working on a video on this right now, saying, all right, what are the factors involved in making sure Tesla gets enough batteries in 2025? Because there's batteries are one thing and raw materials are another. And I see two broad ways that Tesla can approach this. First is to secure those raw materials for their in-house supply. And second, make sure that they get more contracts than everybody else. Because if they eat the lunch of all the other manufacturers, then they should be able to secure their cell supply, even if there's a shortage of raw materials. If everybody's signing contracts with Tesla, then they should be in a good position. But that's an hour conversation just in itself.
Yeah, I totally agree. And what I think is just so ironic about this time right now as we live today is that Tesla is the largest automaker who's purchasing batteries. And what we've seen in a lot of cases with traditional automakers is they've done joint ventures with the battery suppliers and battery makers, but Tesla's been in this game so long that they've gone past the JV, and now they're looking at how they can buy up the land, the raw materials, how they can secure the raw materials. So they've almost leapfrogged the auto industry in a way that I don't know if a lot of people have ever expected or anticipated, because now they've become the largest player in the most important part of an electric vehicle. So it used to be, I don't know if you remember this back in the day, like when Tesla first started producing the Model S, they couldn't get the larger suppliers for some of their parts in the car, and so they had to go several levels down, because the larger suppliers wouldn't work with them because they were so new. They were such a new car company. But it's just ironic that now the tables have turned. Tesla is the largest purchaser of batteries, and now they can really control their own destiny in terms of prices of raw materials, and everything in between raw materials and the actual final product.
Yeah, you're speaking my language. There's a series of positive feedback loops that Tony Seba has done a good job of covering off, but we can see it with what's happening with the 4680. Tesla decides to adopt a new cell design, so the whole industry moves to that cell design. And anybody else who wants 2170 battery cells, well, sorry, you're going to have to ship the 4680 soon if you want battery cells. And then because Tesla is the largest manufacturer, they can negotiate the best prices for those battery cells. So Tesla will likely get their battery cells for cheaper than anybody else. And the fact that they have in-house production is going to compound that even more, because they can say, well, we'll just expand our in-house production if you're not willing to play ball with us here. And then on top of that, Tesla has the most efficient stack, so they can get more out of every battery cell that they buy. So Tesla, even though they're getting their battery cells for cheaper, they can actually afford to pay more for their battery cells than anybody else. Not just because of how efficient their stack is, but because their whole manufacturing system is cheaper than anybody else's, with like the gigacasting, for instance.
How significant do you think it is that Tesla is doing the battery manufacturing in-house versus doing joint ventures with other battery suppliers? I mean, they are integrating battery production into their manufacturing process. So these plants have everything all together, as I understand it.
Yeah, well, it's the obvious answer is it gives them an enormous advantage. Quantifying that advantage is I can't overstate it enough how important that is to them, because I just mentioned the fact that it will allow them to puts them in a better negotiating position, but also gives them a better bead on where the materials market is. It gives another feed. So just from a supply perspective and a cost perspective, it helps just with contract negotiations and keeping on in terms of overall strategy. But in terms of reducing cost, some of these battery suppliers are charging 10, 20, 30% on their battery cells. So that's costs that Tesla doesn't have to pay to suppliers as an intermediary. And then on top of that, if they're building them on site, then they don't have to pay logistics and shipping, which itself, that's probably, I don't know, another 5 or 10%. So I don't, Tesla, very quickly, it's one more thing that allows them to get closer to the materials cost. Less ticket clipping by suppliers and lower shipping costs. And then on top of that, it's just a faster and more efficient production process. So I think they're, just with that alone, they're going to be able to lop off another, I think they said on the Battery Day slide, the factory saves them something like 10 or 15%. I forget the exact number, but it was significant. Overall, this is going to, Tesla's going to be able to get their battery cells for, even if somebody copies what they do, they're going to be able to get their battery cells for 20 or 30% cheaper because they're producing them in-house.
So we've talked about the 4680 cells. Those are going to go into vehicles. You said that they're going to try and put those into across their entire lineup, but we've also seen a lot of talk about LFP batteries. So what does LFP stand for, and where does that fall into the mix of batteries and where those will go into vehicles?
LFP stands for lithium ferrophosphate, and it's just the cathode material. And ferro, of course, is iron. So it's an iron-based cathode rather than a nickel-based cathode. The energy density of those cells is getting high enough now to where you can get a vehicle with a range of 250 to 300 miles if you optimize it really well. So you can replace quite a bit of the battery cell production with iron. That's just for vehicles. But energy storage, I think all energy storage is going to go to lithium iron phosphate batteries because they're not only cheaper, but they have much longer cycle life. So as Elon said, the ratio of iron to nickel-based battery cells, he didn't give a time frame, but I'm guessing it's by the end of the decade or possibly even as early as 2026 or 2027. I see, 75 to 80% of battery cells being produced will be lithium iron phosphate. So besides the cost advantages and the availability of raw materials, another advantage of lithium iron phosphate batteries is that they're safer. And as we were talking about before with the GM recall, safety has a value to auto manufacturers. It's a peace of mind. For me as an investor, I'd like to see as many lithium iron phosphate batteries as possible because it's just, they're more available, they're cheaper, they do the job, and they're safer.
I think one of the overlooked things, just sort of larger picture, and maybe for people who aren't following Tesla in the industry as closely as we are, is Tesla in particular is not just putting these batteries into automotive vehicles, but you talked about stationary storage. So there are tons of houses and buildings that are going to want and need stationary storage if they're even just as a backup. But if you've got solar, you want to store that energy into for the nighttime when there is no sun shining. To me, I don't know how to quantify that, but I know as a real estate agent, there's a lot of houses and there's a lot of business transactions going on with the sale of residential and commercial properties. And that's a whole nother line of business for them. And if they can get these batteries for cheap, they control a lot more of the destiny and the raw materials. They're going to be able to offer these products at a lower cost, higher energy density, and more reliable and safe, as you're talking about.
Well, for the lithium iron phosphate batteries, everything there is true. They'll be able to produce more lithium iron phosphate battery packs for energy storage. However, the energy density will be lower than nickel-based chemistry. So if they do decide to use it for Powerwall, which I'm not sold on the idea that they'll use it for Powerwall, I see it definitely being lithium iron phosphate definitely will be used for commercial energy storage. As for home energy storage, I'm not sure yet because these lithium iron phosphate battery packs will be heavy. And a lot of people mount them to the walls in their garage or the walls in their house. And I don't know how much weight those walls can support because if you have a whole string of lithium iron phosphate battery packs, I'm assuming that would be over like 1,000 pounds.
In regards to weight, though, I would think that you would be a little bit more conscientious of the weight on an actual vehicle versus it being stored somewhere. So even if they did have an additional weight factor with stationary storage, and you need to reinforce a wall, the weight may not be as much of a factor there if it's just sitting or mounted up against a wall versus an actual car where you've got to deal with efficiencies and drag and weight and all things that are important for range, right?
Yeah, I agree. It's something that I'm thinking about. I don't see why the LFP couldn't be used for home energy storage. And as an aside, if they do shift all their commercial energy storage to lithium iron phosphate, currently all those battery cells are nickel based. So
Yeah, I mean they're pretty heavy as is. I don't recall what the actual current weight is of those things, but they're pretty heavy, and they get delivered to houses on pallets. So I think it does require some sufficient strength. But anytime I've seen these things mounted on walls, it's just been mounted to the actual studs behind the drywall. So I don't know either.
if they can be mounted to a wall, then I'm assuming that and it won't have any structural impacts on the house. Yeah, then absolutely they're going to use LFP. It's just something that I try not to get out over the tips of my skis and assume things. So I'm playing it safe here, but I would like to see Tesla use. That's probably the best way to see it. They'll definitely use it in commercial energy storage, and I would like them to see them use it in home energy storage because it will reduce the cost. I don't know if that'll be passed on to the customers because they have such a backlog, but over time, it eventually will drive down the cost in the long term, and it'll allow Tesla to scale more quickly and get that into more houses.
Okay, so that's definitely something to keep in mind and see if Tesla is watching this video and takes our advice on that. Okay, so let's wrap this conversation up. I want to know, you talked about the 4680 cells going into production into vehicles Q1 of 2022. So where do those vehicles go? Where do those cells go into? Is that Model Y and Model 3, or is that at a higher priced vehicle, lower volume like S and X and I don't know, maybe Cybertruck?
I'm pretty sure it's going to be in the Model Y coming out of Austin. Now, this is probably something we can touch on quickly here, but Tesla originally said that the 4680 battery cells with all their new architecture would be rolling out of Berlin first. But due to all the delays we've seen in Berlin, I think that's going to be cut over to Austin. And we're already seeing the 4680 battery manufacturing equipment being installed at or being delivered at Giga Austin. So I think they're going to set that factory up first. The battery cells are going to go into those Model Ys first. And I'm betting that some of the overflow that they have, because right now if they have that line up and running, they're not just going to let it sit idle. They're producing battery cells right now at Cato Road. What are they doing with those battery cells? My guess is a lot of those are going into test mules. Some of them might be going into Tesla semis. I think we just saw today that Pepsi is taking delivery or expecting to take delivery this quarter. So I'm hoping some of those will be have 4680s in them. I think the semi almost requires the 4680 battery cell. But another place where they could use these the first cells that came off the line is whenever you set up a supercharging station with they also have to set up like a battery pack to help support that supercharger station. So I bet they're using a lot there in the supercharger stations. Just kind of somebody suggested that to me, and I think it makes perfect sense because the first cells off the line might have some. There might be more risk attached to them, like the battery cells that were produced 6 months ago. But there would be a good sink for those battery cells as supercharger stations in the meantime, or the Tesla Semi. But yeah, first production, I would think would be Model Y.
My follow-up question to that is why the Y? Is that because they're producing the most of those, or they expect to produce the most of those? Why the Model Y?
The feeling I get, at least from what Elon's been saying, they want to put all their most advanced technology into this newest version of the Model Y. It's going to be the best-selling vehicle in the world, and they can just dump cells into that production line as production spools up. My original thought was that they would use the 4680 in the Plaid Model S, but just because, as you were talking about, with margin. But if they have the Kato road line at a high yield rate, then those battery cells shouldn't be terribly expensive. They should be comparable to the 2170 cells they're getting from other locations. So I think that solves the margin problem if they can produce those 4680 batteries at a decent scale at Kato Road. Yeah, and putting those 4680 battery cells and a high volume mass produced vehicle, that's ultimately what the 4680s are going to be used for anyways. So you may as well get that into those vehicles as soon as possible. And when the production scales up for Giga Austin and Giga Berlin later this year, or in 2022 and early 2023, then all they have to do is just switch from the cells from Kato Road to the cells from Austin and Berlin. So there's less Tetris and less jimmying around of the supply chain if they just put that in there from the beginning, rather than faffing around with multiple different battery packs.
Okay, great insight here. I think on that note, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Jordan from the Limiting Factor YouTube channel, thanks for joining. Great to catch up with you again. Really great insight. And as I said at the beginning of the recording, great to see your face too.
Yeah, it was great talking to you too. I've been out of the interview circuit for a while. I need to get back into it because I do, like you, I get a lot out of the interactions that I have with the Tesla community and interacting with other Tesla YouTubers. When you haven't done it for a while, you just kind of feel disconnected. So, yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Good to have you on, and I'll link his channel up in the video description. So if you're not subscribed, go check his stuff out. It's really, really great and really, really detailed. And it still blows my mind that this is just a hobby that you've taken on and have just devoured the information. You talk like an expert in the industry. It's amazing.
Yeah, well, it's surprised me too. I didn't expect my. By day, I work for the tax department, so it was my moonlight. My moonlighting turned into something much bigger than I expected it to be at the beginning. So
it's actually a really great story, and we'll have to talk a little bit more in detail about that in another video. But thanks again, Jordan. Signing off here, Sean from All Things EV. Thank you for tuning in. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing, and catch everyone on the next video.